There has been a lot of talk in the Kenyan society about Kenyans in diaspora in the past weeks, and these conversations have been brought up because of the deportations that have been happening in the United States, and there have been accusations that some Kenyans are reporting the undocumented Kenyans and getting them deported. And suddenly there's been this explosion of the villainization of Kenyans who are living in the diaspora, and suddenly everyone is like, Kenyans in the diaspora are like the worst people ever. They will never help you. They're always looking out for themselves. And as someone who has actually lived abroad, I do have a unique point of view when it comes to this conversation, because I know exactly what people mean when they say Kenyans in diaspora are bad people. I know exactly the experiences that Kenyans are having in the diaspora. That's why it's important for me to share my point of view, because it's important to always have multiple points of views. First thing that I've been hearing is that Kenyans in the diaspora are bad people because they're always looking out for themselves. They don't have the sense of community, and there are people who are trying to use Kenyan culture to justify why they're saying that Kenyans in the diaspora are selfish. They're talking about how Kenyan culture is about community, is about helping each other. And you know, when I listen to people saying these things, I'm wondering, which Kenya are you living in? Because the modern Kenyan society doesn't care for community, cares for individualism. I don't know why a lot of Kenyans expect that once a Kenyan arrives in a country abroad, they're suddenly going to care about community and care about helping their brother or sister. When Kenya as a society, it's a man-eat-man society. Isn't this cannibalism the reason why our politics are the way they are? It's just about you and your God. I don't understand why the Kenyans in diaspora are expected to suddenly start caring about their brother and sister, when we've had over and over that when the Kenyans in diaspora send money even to their own family members to help them with investments or even projects, 90% of the time they'll find that the family member that they trusted squandered all the money that this Kenyan in the diaspora had been sending. This is something that has been happening for a very long time. And suddenly you're expecting Kenyans in diaspora to become these angels that are going to care about their brother and sister. Can we just stop with this pretense? I'm really exhausted each and every time people are like, Kenyans care about community. You know, even back in Kenya, your neighbor can always help you if you don't have salt. I can understand the kinds of people that still think like this, and most times you'll find that it's the Kenyans who have lived abroad for quite a little while, and they're quite disappointed that they're not receiving help from their fellow Kenyans in the diaspora like they imagined they would receive the help if they were back home. But the reality is, when you move abroad, most of the times the idea that you have of your own country is more like a romanticized version. And actually, according to psychology, your brain can actually trick you into creating memories that are not there. And because a lot of people go through a lot of mental struggles when they are abroad, you find that they start creating memories about their own home countries that actually do not exist. I actually know this is true because this is something that I went through. It got to a point where I actually forgot why I left the country in the first place, because in my head I was telling myself that my life would have been better if I just stayed. But the reality is very different, and that's the reason why a lot of young people want to leave the country, because things are not working in the country. But the moment you leave the country, because things become so hard in that Western country that you go to, you start romanticizing your home country, you start romanticizing Kenya, and suddenly you start lying to yourself, telling yourself that, oh, the neighbors would care about you if you were back in Kenya. But in reality, a lot of your neighbors don't even care, only care if you have something that they can benefit from. I mean, that is the era we are in, the capitalist world. It just doesn't make sense to hold the Kenyans in diaspora to higher standards when the home country is absolutely not better. And of course, I'm not saying that once Kenyans get into the diaspora that they should not care about helping any Kenyan at all, but I want people to recognize that sometimes it's actually not possible to help other people because you yourself, you're trying to survive. I don't think a lot of people understand the reality of life abroad, and that is because a lot of people have this idea that going abroad is paradise. But as I've said before, when you go to a whole different country as an African, you are not even starting from zero, you are starting from the negative, because all the achievements and qualifications that you have, that you've got in your own country, all of that is disregarded because of this stereotype that has always been sold outside of Africa, that Africa is impoverished, poor. So when you go there, they actually think that you are unqualified. They don't think that you can do anything. On top of that, especially when you get to these white Western countries, you're not just an African, you're also a black African, but you're also just not a black African. You're a black African who is also an immigrant. So you have all these identities that have negative connotations that are being thrown onto you without you knowing, and all these things are actually going to prevent you from getting the things that you want. It means that most time you have to accept reducing yourself to levels that you've never really imagined for you to just get by. You're basically going to be in survival mode. I can tell you for a fact, when you are in survival mode, you do not have the luxury of thinking about the other person. You don't have the luxury to think about how to help a fellow Kenyan who has just arrived and looks lost, because even you yourself, you are trying to survive, and there's nothing you can really do about your situation because the people back home are thinking that you are living in this paradise, and you can't even share the challenges that you're going through because they will tell you that you are ungrateful. Do you know how many people would kill to have that chance? And of course you would think maybe turn to other Kenyans who are there and you can share the challenges together. But the reality is that it really doesn't work like that. Everyone is so busy trying to earn a living, and in a lot of these countries the cost of living is so high, higher than you can ever imagine, and that means that literally each and every penny that someone is getting is going into the bills, and on top of that some of them have to send the money back home. In fact, there's so many people that are sending money back home, but if you see how they're living in these countries, they're living worse than a village dog. You find that a lot of Kenyans are eating 1 meal a day. 1 meal a day. And they still have to do most times back-breaking work. And you're expecting that kind of person to just throw themselves and be like, oh my God, what do you need? I'm going to help you. They're trying to survive, and there's no one who can help them. And suddenly you're expecting them to just self-sacrifice, become this angel for you, and just help you with all your problems. You know, the funny fact is, and a lot of Kenyans actually always try to argue with me when I say this, but a lot of Kenyans who are living in Kenya are living better lives than the Kenyans who are in the diaspora. And the argument I'm always being given is that, oh, at least they have a job. But you know, the funny thing is that once you get a job and once you start making money is when you start realizing there's so many other things that are more important in life than a job and money. And that's something that you realize once you start living in these Western countries, most especially. Because yes, you'll get that job. Most times it's not the job that you want. It's not a job that is actually helping you to advance in your career. It's a job that you just have to do to survive. It's a job that most times you won't like. And maybe yes, you can overlook the fact that you don't like that job with the fact that you're making money. But you see, the thing that you're actually ignoring is that yes, you're making money, but remember what I said earlier, the identity of you being a black, being an African, and being an immigrant, all of them are also coming into play here. It means that for some Kenyans in the diaspora, maybe even many of them, you have to go through days where you're always being reminded that you are unwanted. It means finding yourself in a culture that rejects everything that you are. I remember while I was looking for apartments in Paris and being told that they can't take an African because they don't like African cooking. I remember going to stores like Sephora and being followed around by a black security guard at that, just because they think that because you're black, you're going to steal. And obviously for a lot of those things, I really didn't mind them, because when it comes to this idea of just trying to discriminate someone based on their skin color, I think it's stupid. But I can tell you for a fact, when you experience these kinds of things on a day-to-day basis, it's going to affect you mentally. And I know there are people who have never lived abroad who are like, oh, that's not gonna happen to me. You think you're superhuman? The levels of dehumanization that you go through as an African, as a black African immigrant in these countries, especially the Western countries, it's just on another level. And only those who have experienced this can actually tell you. And of course, there's the other side of the coin, which a lot of people have been speaking about the fact that there are Kenyans in diaspora who are absolutely jealous of others. And I would say that it's jealousy coupled with self-hatred. This is something that I've really spoken about, especially in my earlier videos. It is a fact that a lot of Africans have self-hate, and they always think that other Africans do not deserve to become successful because they don't think that Africans or people with black skin deserve to be successful. It's this kind of crab mentality where you will see that when an African is actually doing well, it is other Africans who are actually pulling them down. You'll find these kinds of people in the diaspora. Of course, I can understand it to some point, but you know, at some point, it doesn't help anyone for you to be living in victim mentality. There's some people who go to these Western countries and they expect that things are going to work very well for them all of a sudden, but a lot of things come into play play, because it also depends with the kind of city you go into. Most of the times, if you go to the main city, you might find yourself getting success much faster than others. But a lot of people also underestimate how long it actually takes you to become successful, because as I said earlier, you're not starting from zero, you are starting from the negative. And for many people that you see who are successful in these Western countries, it's taken them over a decade. Even worse, if you go to a country where you have to learn a new language, because it means for you to actually create your own space there, you have to learn the language to fluency, and it actually takes time. This mentality of get rich quick that a lot of Kenyans have, it doesn't work, unfortunately, in a lot of these countries. That's why you'd find that some people have a lot of jealousy. They go there and then they find these Kenyans who have been in these Western countries for like a decade, for 7 years, and you want to compete with them. You've just arrived and you want to compete with people who have been there, who have invested their time and energy into learning the culture, into learning the language. Trying to compare yourself, and you're expecting them to accommodate you, to do everything in their power to make your life easier. No, they have themselves to take care of. A lot of them have their own families. They even have families back home. It really doesn't make sense for you to be expecting people to become angels for you. It also doesn't make sense for you to be jealous of people when you don't even know their trajectory. And I really don't understand why the Kenyans in the diaspora that have this jealousy are admonished so highly, when that is also a problem that we see in this country. The reason why we have a lot of leaders who do not want to develop the Kenyan economy, who don't want to see small businesses win, is because of this self-hatred and jealousy. Because they feel like if more Kenyans are educated and they are employed and they have financial security, they feel like that is going to be a threat to their political power. So instead of just complaining about Kenyans in the diaspora who are actually helping the Kenyan economy with their remittances, it's time that people put a lot of focus into actually fixing this country.